Good evening. I'm Davide Gobbicchi from ITSS Verona and Fabrizio di Napoli from ITSS Verona. We're here today with Professor Stephen Blank, who's currently a senior fellow professor at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, and has been for the past 24 years a professor of Russian and Strategic Studies at the U.S. Army War College. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning.
Today we are gonna talk about three main topics. The first one is going to be Central Asia. The second one is going to regard the energy situation in Europe with regards to Central Asia's new possible role. And the third one will regard the Caucasus. I'm going to start with the first question regarding Central Asia. How would you see the growing antagonism for influence between Russia and China in Central Asia? So on the one side, we have China's increasing role in Central Asia, as opposite to Russia's, let's say, traditional cultural impact in the region. So what is your prediction? Which of the two will prevail in following decades, in the next decades?
Well, first of all, if there is an antagonism, it's well hidden. So it's hard to say that it's growing, but there's certainly a competition, but it's a very quiet competition. Neither China nor Russia advertises that they are in competition with each other. Quite the opposite, they advertise that they are strategic partners, some would even say allies, and that they have a common interest in Central Asia. And they do have many common interests, particularly preventing overturns of the government or revolutions in Central Asia, and certainly preventing terrorism in Islam. However, Russian power is not primarily cultural. It's first of all military. The support for Russia in Central Asia derives from the fact that Russia still has substantial military assets there, can project power easily into Central Asia, and is also regarded as the protector of last resort in Central Asia. What happened in Kazakhstan a year ago, in January, is an example. They had riots in the city, and President Tokayev called in Russian forces from the Collective Security Treaty Organization, the CSTO, and the riots ended. So the basis of Russian power is, first of all, military. Second is the Russian language, which is fading because we have now a whole generation of people who were not educated in Soviet schools. Many Central Asians are going abroad, Europe, United States, maybe Middle East, or China for education purposes. Third, there's an major economic component through the Eurasian Economic Union, and from the fact that Central Asian energy pipelines, for the most part, still go through Russia. Chinese policy is primarily economic, based on large-scale trade and investment. It is the largest foreign trader and investor in Central Asia. And when Central Asian governments now want to launch major capital investments through bonds, they do so in Shanghai. It's been going on for about 10 years, not in London or certainly not in Moscow. And there are signs of ever so cautiously increasing Chinese military projection into Tajikistan in particular, which is on the border with China and Afghanistan, presumably against Islamic terrorism, but that's only the stated purpose. Beyond that, Central Asia as a region has now been independent for 30 years. Iran and Turkey are making substantial efforts to increase their presence and influence, as is India. And the United States is involved economically as well. So I don't know that any foreign government is going to have preponderant influence in Central Asia in the future. I would be surprised if anybody actually does, because I think that the long-term trend is towards balancing out all these competing forces. So I would be skeptical about that. And I am not skeptical that Russian influence will diminish, simply because there are other contenders. Central Asia is increasingly globalized, and the influence of the rest of the world on Central Asia is going to be substantial. And therefore, Russia's efforts to maintain a leadership position, I think, are in serious jeopardy over the long term. You can already see it happening also.
Thank you for your reply. Sticking to the region of Central Asia and including the Caucasus as well, what regarding the current energy crisis and the important role played by several countries within Central Asia and the Caucasus on the energy front, what could the European Union how could the European Union develop its relation with new possible energy players so as to replace the now decreasing energetic role that was formerly played by Russia?
Well, the European Union is going all over the world to look for energy sources. First of all, Africa. Algeria, for example. You're in Italy. Italy has now a new deal with Algeria, a big one. Germany has also signed deals with African countries. They're looking in the Middle East, for example, as far as gas goes, they're looking to Qatar. They're looking to Central Asia and Azerbaijan as well. There are deals already with Azerbaijan, and there is the hope that there can be a deal with Central Asia. Now, for Central Asia in particular, the only way they can get the energy to Europe is if they can build a Trans-Caspian pipeline, because the Russian government is not going to allow its pipelines to be used for that. That would substantially undermine a major source of Russian power over Central Asia, and for that matter, over European energy economies. The only way Central Asia can do this then is to build a pipeline through the Caspian Sea. And if they're going to do that, we know that Russia and Iran will oppose it and probably try to destroy it. As we know, Russia is not afraid to use force to secure its objectives. So if the European Union is really serious about energy, it not only has to upgrade its overall relationship with Central Asia and deal much more intensely with Central Asia across a wide range of economic and other issues, somebody is going to have to give a security guarantee for a pipeline through the Caspian. And it's going to have to be a serious guarantee. Until and unless that happens, the idea that Central Asia can provide Europe with a lot of energy is just a non-starter, because the Russian obstacles are too strong. So that's realistically, that's what has to happen. And there's no sign of that happening right now. Azerbaijan is a different story, because Azerbaijan has already built pipelines that go to Italy. The TAP pipeline, Trans-Anatolian pipeline, that then goes through Turkey to Greece and Albania, where it hits the Trans-Adriatic pipeline. The TAP is already sending gas to Italy and to the Balkans. What also needs to happen is a further extension of Balkan pipelines, so that Azerbaijan and potentially Central Asia can send more energy to the Balkans, and then from the Balkans they can go to the rest of Europe. So and I've published on this, you need to build a pipeline from where the TAP pipeline ends in Albania to the Kirk Island refinery in Croatia. Kirk Island is spelled KRK. and then a pipeline from there to Austria, then it goes all over Europe. So you have to finish the infrastructure in the Balkans as well as in the Caspian to make Central Asian energy a reality for Europe.
And,
One other thing, when the war is over, whenever that starts, whenever that happens, and Ukraine begins to recover, if Ukraine can reform its energy economy, Ukraine has enough energy, even if you take out what the Russians occupied, the Ukraine has enough energy, not only to supply itself, but actually to export some to Europe. And again, you would be able to build pipelines to Ukraine, add Ukrainian energy and so on. So infrastructure there is also going to be, when peace comes, critical. But the problem with Central Asia proper, that is the countries on the east and north of the Caspian Sea, is that someone has to give them a guarantee for a trans-Caspian pipeline. Otherwise, Russia will use force against it, if not Iran.
with regards to the fact we have a power struggle, possible future power struggle in between Europe and Russia, so as to secure on the one side Europe.
Well, it's not a future power struggle. It's been happening for years. It's right now. I mean, the war has just aggravated it, but this has been going on for years. The whole effort to secure what was called then the Nabucco pipeline, if you remember, by the EU, which was a complete failure, was about this kind of thing. But unless you're willing to invest the money and defend the pipeline in the Caspian Sea, Central Asian energy will not go to Europe.
What would China's role be within Central Asia in between the struggle between Russia and the EU from an energetic point of view?
That's an interesting question, because the Chinese have never commented on what they would do. I'm not sure they'd get involved. They have all the energy they need from Central Asia and Russia. I don't think they'd want to get involved in a Central Asian conflict. It's not a priority for them. They might be politically and economically involved in some way, but again, if you are going to bring Central Asian energy to Europe and you cannot rely on Russia, you have to go through the Caspian Sea or Iran. Iran is out of the question for obvious reasons. The Caspian Sea, the Russians and the Iranians will oppose it, and the Russians will use force if the Iranians don't. Somebody will have to give you a military guarantee of that pipeline. And so to make it economically worthwhile, because it's an extremely expensive investment, particularly at a time when Europe is saying, not only do we still need hydrocarbons, we also want to get away from hydrocarbons and go green. So why build a pipeline? Where's the financial return? Let alone the danger of military action against it.
Okay, thank you for your question. Now I let my space to Fabrizio.
Yes, the last question is about the future of Russia's influence over the Caspian Sea region, because in recent years we have seen like a stronger Turkish presence in that part of the world, and I wonder if energy and military relations between Turkey and Azerbaijan can become a model also for other countries facing over the Caspian Sea, like Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan and so on and so forth, because of their common Turkish heritage that could enable Turkish influence also in other realms other than culture.
Well, Turkey is playing up the Turkic heritage. This is the Turkish version of Eurasianism, which goes back really to the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century. It's now been revived. And you see that they're doing that. But in reality, Turkey is now trying to project power into Central Asia. It has already projected power successfully into the Caucasus, projecting power everywhere, Middle East, Africa, It is essentially using economic and military capability to do this. It is attempting to make technology and military and arms transfers to Central Asia, provide maybe military training to Central Asian militaries like it is doing in Azerbaijan, sell them weapons and so forth, as it is done in Azerbaijan, and to make economic deals. At the end of the day, I don't think Turkey has the economic capability to sustain this vision in its largest expression. But they will certainly be making the effort for the foreseeable future. And if they can get their economic house in order, they will be able to play a bigger role than might be currently expected. So they are trying to take advantage of the opportunity to do so. They have a very interesting relationship with Russia. There are elements of tension as well as elements of cooperation. You see this also in Syria and with regard to Ukraine now and the war. But they are determined to play the role in the Caucasus where they can sustain themselves. Central Asia, I think, is over the long term will be harder. Central Asians are not going to let any one foreign power dominate the scene there. That's what the whole idea of what Nazarbayev called the multi-vector diplomacy is all about. And all the Central Asian states try to practice it to whatever degree they're able to do so. So Turkey is going to be a player, but it's going to be one player among others in Central Asia. It has something to offer in the way of economic investment and military technology and training, but economically, it does not have enough power to compete, let's say, with China. And if the EU were to get involved in a big way, Turkey could not compete with that either. So I think that should answer your question, does it? Does that answer?
It does, but I was also interested in military cooperation between Turkey and Caspian Sea countries.
Well, there's already a very strong military cooperation with Azerbaijan, which we know about. That's out in the open. They are going to try to develop it with Central Asian countries. They're going to try to sell them drones, military technology, and weapons. They may make deals to do training for Central Asian militaries, but I'm not sure that they can successfully project and sustain power all the way to Central Asia. Caucasus is one thing, Central Asia is another. So it remains to be seen.
Okay, it's actually satisfactory because Central Asia, it's not a very studied region, I would say, but the dynamics there are peculiar, and definitely Turkish confidence, self-confidence in the Caucasus is very different from what it can develop in Central Asia, also, in my opinion.
Well, absolutely, because in the Caucasus, they won a war. And they are trying to dictate terms to Armenia. That's not the case in Central Asia. And the Central Asians have other options. Russia, China, Iran, India, United States, EU, Japan, South Korea even. They don't have to depend on Turkey. And they're not going to let any one power become that kind of hegemonic figure. So the Turks are in the running, but so is everybody else.
Yeah, that's very clarifying, actually, because for the same reason, like nobody often mentions the role of like Iran, India, and East Asia in Central Asia, but
well, there is a lot. There's literature on that here in the United States and and abroad. I mean, I'm familiar with some of it, but it would be a mistake to overlook those players in Central Asia. I mean, and the Central Asians themselves are not objects; they are actors. They have what political scientists call agency. They can make their own decisions. They are balancing among all these foreign players, because the more players involved in Central Asia, the better it is for Central Asian governments. And you also are beginning to see the first signs of regional cooperation in Central Asia. So, I mean, yeah, Turkey will try to make its presence felt and try to establish leverage and influence, but they're not going to be able to dominate the situation. Nobody will be, I think.
Okay. Have you still got any questions, Fabrizio? No? Okay. Me neither. So thank you for taking part in our interview, Professor.
My pleasure.
From ITSS Verona, this is all. Thank you.